going to check if this is live now. Just give me 1 second. All right, I think it's working. 1 second. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our discussion at Paris Gibson Square Museum of Art with our featured exhibiting artist, Michael Sechena. His exhibition that's running from May 14th through July 14th is titled Mark Making. I am proud to present Michael. He's sitting alongside me here for this exciting World Wide Web discussion of his exhibition. So everyone, please welcome him. Round of applause, everybody out there.
It's nice to be here. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
We are thankful for all our sponsors here at Paris Gibson Square Museum of Art, including the Davidson Family Foundation, D.A. Davidson, and First Interstate Bank. We also want to say thank you to all of our constant contributors and patrons here at the museum. Without you, we could not make these exhibitions possible. Thank you to all the artists who support our institution as well. Today we're joined by Michael, and during this conversation we're going to learn a little bit about Michael Sechena's work. If you read a little bit about this exhibition, you'll know that what we have on exhibit consists of work that was created during a period of time between the 80s and 90s. So over 2 decades ago. It was and is exciting artwork. I can tell you, we've had visitors come dance in front of Michael's artwork since it's been up on the wall because of all of its exciting marks and the movement it creates. I'm going to go ahead and allow Michael to introduce himself and to tell us a little bit about who he is and how he came to be an artist. And that might seem like a daunting experience, but I think I know that this is how we learn a little bit about who he is and the art that he has exhibited here and so kindly shown to the world, because as he will tell you, it's been a while since anybody has actually laid their eyes on it. We are so grateful to him and grateful to the work that he is allowing our community to see.
Well, thank you very much, and I sure again appreciate being here, and thanks for everybody being out there and tuning in to us today. I'm Mike Sechena. I grew up here in Great Falls, Montana on the west side. I went to St. Joe's, Franklin, and Meadowlark, and then went over to West Junior High and CMR. Off to Bozeman, got my degree there, 1977. So from there, I went to Great Falls here and didn't do much art until I moved to my studio up on the Dearborn River. Bought 33 acres 5 months after I left Bozeman and built my studio 2 years later. So I have a series of work I call the Black and White series, and it was all done up there from roughly about 1983 to when I left and went to Seattle in 1990. And all the color work was done there, and we can talk about that as we progress, obviously. But I had many experiences. I had some great professors. I even went down to school in eastern Montana there in Billings, so that's where I first started doing my art career and got familiar with the theme of being an artist. So it's nice being an artist again after being away from it for so long. It's a good feeling. It was hard to get all this work together. It was stored for a long time, and now I got it stored in here for everybody to appreciate.
So you make an interesting point where you are talking about making that decision to become an artist and moving to Bozeman. and then letting time go through where you did work as an artist, and then allowing a time where you made a decision to take a break, I guess, from the activity of being an artist for a while, and now allowing that work that you created over 2 decades ago come to light. How does that feel? And why that decision to exhibit your work at the Square now?
Well, most of this work was done and never really been shown, so I feel real lucky to get it all together. Obviously, the big paintings, there's 4 of them, 5 of them that are 8 feet by 8 feet, and some of them even longer, so they can't be really shown in smaller places in a venue, so this museum is a perfect place, and I couldn't pass up the opportunity to pursue a show here, and luckily, after 12 years of pursuing it, and everybody wanted it, and it was just a matter of time, and I got it here, so. But did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did, yeah. I think for everyone out here in Great Falls who's listening to us right now, it's kind of an impressive act to see these giant canvases, which are in this position here during our discussions. It's difficult to see, but if I move, you might be able to see behind me one of the larger canvases right here titled X. And then he has a series of pieces behind him as well from his color series. But what I'm getting to and what I'm saying is Michael is an extremely impressive artist, and he has grown up here in Great Falls and has a history of being part of this community in Montana, and which in itself has a strong community of artists. And Michael was saying at one point in his conversation with me and other members of the staff here that he remembers growing up in Great Falls and watching Rudy Audio put a mural on one of the local churches. And what does that mean to you to kind of be part of that legacy of Great Falls and Montana artists? And what was that like growing up, being exposed to these people that you were informed by or influenced by? And tell me a little bit about who they were and how that felt.
Well, I was amazed at a 2.5-year-old or a 3-year-old being so interested in this guy building this mural, and asked many questions about it. I was very, very interested in it, but my main influence was obviously when I went to school in Bozeman, and Bob DeWeese was my professor there. And to get back to why I got going and doing more art in my studio in the early 80s is I remember what Bob one time sat us all down in class and said, okay, here's the deal. I'll guarantee you that 90% of you artists here will not be doing art in 10 years. And I was just shocked that somebody would say that. And when that 10 years came up, I said, I'm going to be one of those guys doing art. And I started producing tons of stuff at a studio, and I just told myself, determination, I was going to be an artist and continue that career that I started. And luckily, I put together this thing with Nicole's help. Thank you. And I think it's a real good show. I feel real proud of it. I believe when people come in here, they will feel happy and appreciate the work, because it was hard to do. It took a lifetime to make, and I accomplished my goal to show it to you. That was my perspective of why I did it, to show the public.
And I think that you very much accomplished that goal of creating intense amounts of artwork. Because I will tell you that when we came to the point of deciding how and what we were going to exhibit, it was very difficult because Michael is a prolific artist, and with such energy, I tell you, when you look at the works of art on exhibit, when you come to the museum, um, you can see the energy and the drive inside every single one of the works on exhibit here. And I think that is a good time to talk about how we situate in context Michael's artwork. One thing that I think about as an art historian is when Michael was creating this artwork, he is also a connoisseur of world histories. He's a traveler. He is a poet. He enjoys literature and theory. And during the time that Michael was creating this artwork, it was a complex time, right, Michael?
Oh, yeah. Yes, the art world was going through what I believe was some sort of a transitional, revolutionary change. Obviously, the mid-70s, we artists tried to struggle to even get any art out on the walls because everybody was putting it on the floors and dancing and doing the performance art and the conceptual art, and they were losing focus of the canvas. And I personally decided I was going to stick with the canvas and not let that genre disappear. And it took artists like me and anybody else that was out there trying to continue this history we have. That we were real close to losing it, I think. And obviously the Neo-German Expressionism created a whole new movement, and the eclectic world of pluralism evolved, and that's what we lived through, and we are still living through it right now. Any art goes. I mean, it's obvious just going through the museum now. They have a show of the student schools here, and it's just phenomenal seeing how many different types of art is up there, and how beautiful it is, and how all these kids are getting involved with art again. I think it's very cool. This museum is wonderful.
Yeah, and I think that when in those points that you were making, Michael's going to read a little bit about kind of the basis, what would you call it? A manifesto of sorts of your monochromatic black and white series. And I think that when I hear that this manifesto that he has written, and I think about the time period, and like Michael said, this urgency to continue to produce artwork on a canvas during a time where there was a push of postmodern theory, right, Michael?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and conceptualism brought about by
Performance, earth art.
And the performance and the earth art, yes, exactly. A time of questioning what direction art would go and should go. And I believe that Michael's work is an example of that period in the sense that, yes, it is work, painting on canvas, but it has a lot of the conversation that is involved in conceptual thinking as well. It's a response to formalist ideas such as composition, line, balance, rhythm, movement, but it also asks you to think further into what modernism has brought us, right? And the influence of those artists, such as the Impressionists and the Expressionists and whatnot, but also thinking about what it means to have a certain concept behind your artwork that has to do with language and understanding. And each one of these marks that you utilize is, in a sense, an extension of that period and an extension of you. So I'm going to go ahead and let you, Michael, read this manifesto of your work.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I wrote this, back in 1985 or so. It's about the artist. Now I'm working on, producing drawings that at first glance appear to be childish scribbling or meaningless garble, but to an acute, perceptually conscious observer, attentive eclectic smear prevails. With the advent of modernism, well over a century old, a certain awareness evolved concerning man's attitude towards the receptiveness of the world around him. Man, the instrument of invention, carved an endless vision in the void, something made of the unknown, a thing seen within. Concerning my new drawings, done in black and white, I feel they're a bit conceptual in the sense that the mind is given the opportunity to construct the form. Subsequently, the content becomes personal or innate. This appropriate articulation defies laws of nature and introduces multi-perception, multi-dimensions, multi-depths, which are communicated in attitudes in a pluralistic manner. About the style. I'm disguising the background by confusing it with the foreground and interchanging their value. At the same time, mixing the whole composition's interior and exterior. My main concern is to define the space around the object idea rather than outlining, rendering, or drawing the contour. The space within the subject matter constitutes the presence of the image, and subsequently, the invisible particles around it verifies its existence. The dichotomy that may exist could have many meanings. For example, juxtaposition reality and make-believe, fact and fiction, validity and fantasy. The mind rotates from one side to the other and eventually relays the objective or remains blank. As one becomes more familiar with the principles applied, such as basic rules of illusion, for example, the simple diagonal, one transcends beyond the visual stigma, entering the perplexed state of the subliminal. What the mind knows is there, may or not see directly. This indulgence, interpreted with the unity of instinctive intuition, spontaneity, gestural expression, and primitive individualism, structurally defines my format. A fusion of swirling, twirling slashes alongside dotted smudges manifests itself into a semi-objective aberration, one that oscillates between latent representation and a completely subjective connotation. My intent is to cause the eye, consequently the mind, to enter a state of euphoria. At this point in my career as a visual artist, I'm dealing with basic fundamentals of visual cognition. My attitudes in the field are to affect the observers, to make them realize where they are by expressing my images in simple marks, and through my knowledge of the world of drawing, I'm qualified to be an interpreter of nature.
So now that we've heard a bit about this, you laugh.
Finally,
I think that,
somebody gets to hear it.
yes, and I think, again, when I hear the different segments to your manifesto, I feel like each one of those segments needs to be unpacked and described separately. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do that
Thank God.
today. But a graduate student out there in the world is welcome to do that. Right, Michael?
Oh yeah, well, I've had many critiques in my day.
But I think it supplies such rich information that really, historically speaking, really puts you in place at that time period. Because when I hear that portion where you talk about, could I borrow it for 1 second? where you are saying, a fusion of swirling, twirling slashes alongside of dotted smudges manifests itself into a semi-objective apparition, one that oscillates between latent representation and a completely subjective connotation. My intent was to cause the eye, consequently the mind, to wander in a state of euphoria.
Okay.
Or confusion. Or both, right?
Scratch confusion out.
Right. So when I see the words that you're using here, you know, there's a direct relationship between this written manifesto and the marks that you're creating on your canvas. Because I think that, you know, you can correct me if I'm wrong in my interpretation on this, but there is this, like you said, this poetic language associated with your manifesto that is meant to directly correlate with the visual imagery and the lines and the marks that you create on your canvases.
That just help you understand it a little bit more. I mean, it's confusing art, for sure. I mean, it seems chaotic, but there is actually substance to it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the joy and the mystery and the intensity of your artwork. You know, because like that postmodern period that you were living in, correct?
Right.
Where the discussion about what art should be, what art should do, where should it go, what it should not be, was all up for discussion, right? And
Where did we discuss it in college? Emphasis was basically on academic studies. I mean, we had our studio time, but at that particular time, the library was my main spot. Reading all the art magazines and trying to get into what was going on in the world instead of being in Little Bozeman. And we were lucky there. We had a position in the faculty that we had a rotating assistant professor come in every quarter. So we had people coming from New York, from California, from France, every quarter, and these were hot artists that were teaching us and telling us what was going on in the outside world. So we had a very good, I mean, Bozeman was actually one of the highly scholastic universities back then in the art world. I mean, people came there because of the art, I believe. And Debbie Butterfield, Dingo, John Buck, they couldn't wait to get there.
And so when you're talking about the influence and the academic influence that you have along with the artists who were working in that period, you were telling me at one point how you moved basically to get into the artwork and start looking at it for a minute. You know, in our discussion, you have two series of work here where you're moving from the monochromatic black and white work to the color work, correct?
Right.
And can you tell the audience a little bit about how that happened? Like, why did you start in the black and white series? What were the decisions that you made, and where were you, and what influenced that process? And then, you know, what made you move away from that and how that happened?
Well, I wanted to just stick with black and white because I was dealing with texture and form and lines and different things, and every time that I made a mark, I tried to make it different. You know, either splattering something on it or smudging it. But every single mark, and if you look at the black and whites, you can see that they're all marks that seem similar, but if you look close, they're all different. And after doing the black and whites for basically, I started usually with a small piece, a postcard, doing the drawing I was going to do, and then I would do another big piece, maybe 20 inches by 30 inches, and then I'd do a big canvas, basically 4 feet by 4 feet. So I always had a phototype to every one of the big canvases. It was an accident that they came up that way. I had little ones to basically look at. So, and the opportunity just to move to Seattle came up, and when I moved, I decided I was going to move on beyond on the black and white, and decided on color crayons because they just weren't messy. They were in pure colors. I didn't have to mix any colors. I like that idea. No oils or whatnot. And then I did massive amount of color crayon work. And with each large painting, there's a whole series and suites of this stuff in that particular style. Because with each large painting, I changed my style. I moved on from the color crayons to oil sticks. And then eventually I just lost the background completely and did my series of totems, what I call them. And they're, we just named them Dancing Chinkas is what I named this whole series today. And they're just figures dancing on white space, no background at all. So you have to come down and take a look at it. I think you'll feel real good when you leave. And you've got to support this museum. So get on down here.
You're funny, Michael. Thank you. So what's hard to have you tell, you cannot see this from our discussion, but hopefully from our discussion you can see that the exhibition is nuanced. From that, we're moving in a trajectory of time throughout this exhibition, where we begin with Michael's work in his black and white series that began here in Montana. And there's also a couple of large-scale works that accompany his black and white series. And tell me a little bit about that. Did those begin before you started your color series, or were they around the same time as your black and white? This is the Archie Bray piece, and the nudes?
Mademoiselles.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were, I think they're 130 inches by 96 inches, so they're big, huge paintings that I incorporated some of the style from black and white. But before I left Montana, I went and didn't study pottery at Archie Bray, but I befriended everybody there and all the graduate students and whatnot, and I was doing pottery and trading my work for some of their pottery, and luckily I got a whole collection of teapots from that whole group during there, and they asked me to do a poster for the Archie Bray Bash. So I made up a poster, and then from that poster I decided I'd do a big huge mural. So that's how that thing evolved. Okay. And what the poster looks like, it's basically all the different pots that I had collected. So it's my collection on this big canvas, and the canvas is kind of unique. I was reading at that time about Picasso's Guernica and how he broke up his canvas and what he did. And if you see these, you'll see that similarity. There's a triangle and there's different panels. There's 3 different panels on it. They're really beautiful pieces. I love them.
They are very beautiful, and I think that words can only do them so much justice, right, Michael?
You gotta come and look at it.
You gotta come and look at it. They're extremely large-scale works of art.
Silly to even talk about them.
I know, it's very difficult. But in this way, we know a little bit about you and where your mindset is when creating the work. Behind us directly, Michael, do you want to talk about your stained glass pieces back here?
Alrighty. That was I did a series of 6 of these pieces. They're all, I don't know, 36 by 36. I didn't want to be totally abstract in them. I feel like they look like stained glass. Now a lot of this stuff isn't real original. I mean, even the big canvas there, I mean, if you look at that, it looks like a folk artist rug of some sort.
Or
And
quilt.
yeah, you know, the patchwork rugs. I'm really interested in folk art. Very interested. I have somewhat of a folk art collection, and I just appreciate, you know, anybody that takes the time to do art, no matter who they are or what it looks like in the end. It always has some legitimacy. But the stained glass is probably my least creative set of work. So it's kind of hard to talk about that. I mean, it's kind of cut and dry. I don't know what else to say about it. Each panel is different, again. I didn't want to repeat the same motif from one to the next, so it didn't totally drive me crazy, but
I guess what you can talk about too is like when you were talking about the layers of meaning along with the process of creating the lines. So inside of these works where you see a variety of different lines, shapes, motion, and direction, and some of them, maybe even in these stained glass, there's kind of a potential to possibly see something within the images itself, correct?
right, yep. Obviously, with any abstract, you can project what you want to see,
Right.
but
And you've titled it something specific, stained glass, right? Rather than, let's say, untitled.
right, I'd love to see stained glass made out of this stuff. That was kind of my idea too, thinking maybe I would move on to making some stained glass and using these as a format, but never did get around to that. But I don't know what else to say about them.
Do you want to talk about your vortex?
I wish they could see it.
I can turn the camera.
All right, it makes a little.
Just give me a quick second.
Yeah, this one was one of the first one I did with my patchwork. Each color has its own texture, and the texture is what I was after to create the eye to oscillate between juxtaposition things and not be focused on one particular object in the painting. I wanted the eye to wander around, and this one is probably the best one that I did in trying to communicate that. Once again, I used color crayons because they were cheap. They didn't cost much. Right in the middle of making these paintings, excuse me, the color crayon company changed their formula, and some of the colors that I had just like disappeared, and they introduced a whole bunch more, so I decided to throw them all in together and come up with something a little more exciting, maybe something that I can call original. And you know, an artist never wants to plagiarize, he wants to be his own self and create something that he's proud of. And to talk about this, I don't know, I initially called it the swirl, and somebody said it looks like a whirlpool, and somebody said it looked like a vortex, and I just want to bring you into my canvas. I want to see if you can jump inside that thing and be in the same spot I'm at. We were talking earlier about magical realism and what happened in the Renaissance and how these people were mesmerized by an icon or an object. I just feel like when I'm looking at them, I'm leaving this world. I'm jumping into a whole new dimension. And it's not so much the abstract that's doing that. There's form to the abstraction. It's been around for so long. It's kind of a cliche to say abstract artist, but I mean, it's here to stay as far as I can see, and we just got to keep on changing as we can and adding our own hand touch to it. And they're here. They ain't gonna go anywhere for 2 months.
Not going anywhere for 2 months, yes. I know that there are many collectors here who are interested in contemporary art in this area and beyond that. would be very much interested in looking at your work and seeing your work in their own collections, Michael. And I just briefly, I think one last thing before we summarize and conclude our discussion, as we look upon Vortex, the closer you get to Vortex, you can see the way that Michael utilizes the crayon and varies the direction of the line and the direction of the vortex, bringing you inside and outside of this spinning mass of marks. Really, there is quite an ingenious operation at hand there with the way that Michael utilizes the crayon to create this texture and this variety, yet at the same time allowing that difference, like you said, this push and this pull inside of your works. And here, Michael has something he would like to read about it. Here you go.
I have one more thing to say about the color crayon, maybe to help you understand a little bit better. But my primary building blocks are simple geometric forms, which are reproduced one after another in a linear fashion as the peaks and valleys of a sine wave. Superposition of these various wave forms yield secondary features in the larger spectral scales, just as a interference of sound and light waves of various frequencies can yield beats and bright patterns of higher intensity. Coupled with my use of bright pastel-like colors, the most strongly reinforced or highly intensive regions that reflect light seem to jump from the canvas into the viewer's domain.
I think that summarizes exactly what I was trying to talk about.
I'm glad I found that.
And I just, like I said, it's an impressive feat at creating these large-scale works of art that really interrogate so much information, Michael.
They all took 1 year apiece. I worked on.
What's it again?
I worked on one large canvas, and it usually took 1 year to do it. And during that time, I would do a whole series of smaller paintings that represent the same style. And I think there's at least 5 different periods of time that I did here, and showed all kinds, all the time in Seattle. Most of the work has all been sold. Mm-hmm. This is pretty much my private collection that I saved, and obviously the big ones, they didn't move very fast, but mm-hmm. I'm kind of glad they're still here without them.
You did. Which is, it's interesting that you say that, because really the large scale pieces are just so intensely impressive, and really probably some of the highlights of the exhibition are at the largest scale. I mean, that's from my take on this, and not just my take. Like I said, we've had people dancing in the galleries as they observe Michael's work. So I think, Michael, is there anything else you would like to discuss or say?
No, I wish everybody would come down and support the arts in Great Falls. We need to support this place, keep it going. And my main concern was to let everybody know that there's a place we can show artists around here. They have the opportunity. We're going to take advantage of it.
That's true, Michael. And I think what I want to conclude with this, since we were talking about, you were ending on your color works and what you were trying to do with these pieces, and that is probably the last sentence of something that I wrote here, and it says, this exhibition investigates an act of mark making in Sechena's work, which by definition creates form, substance, meaning, and is both product and process. So with that one sentence, if we wanted to take the time, just through the lines that he makes in his work, we can trace back all those things. We can find the form within the composition if we are trying to find one. We can find substance in meaning or interpretation or in concept. We can also look at the work as a product of all of those things, but also look at the process that Michael went through in order to create these works. So they are, as I say as well in this piece, this retrospective of Michael Sechena's work from this period. The mark functions as an extension of his hand, of his mind, and of his body, as explained in the most direct way, in the sense that his hand is connected to his mark-making tool, which is connected to Michael's existence and his history within the context of art. As we extend beyond the logical meaning of mark as a product and process, we take a thoughtful look into the history of Michael's work in the history of art. And the process of making your mark as an artist during this complex period in history during the 80s and 90s within the United States and across the globe. So please, come to the exhibition and join me in thanking Michael Sechena for, let's say, opening up his treasures, his artwork, and bringing them out into the public so that we can investigate, understand, and experience works of art that are truly impressive and are indicative of a period in time that doesn't end, doesn't stop, but rather continues to resonate with artists even today. I believe that the work that Michael has created is a body of work that in a sense is going to influence many artists to come based on his thoughts, his process, and his connections to the artists here in this community in Montana and hopefully across the United States. So when you have a chance, come to the museum and see the works in person, because it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So thank you so much, Michael, and we are so glad to have you here at the Square.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a good night, everyone. We appreciate your time and we appreciate your support. If you're not a member of the Square, now's a great time. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next time. Goodbye.